The other work that I mostly do with organizations lately is on evidence-based management. So to let you know, so I'm trying to have some evidence, but at the same time, I admit that I'm influenced by my personal bias against assholes, which is probably at times irrational, but that's how I am. Okay, so the first one is after you talk to the alleged asshole, I would say, do you feel oppressed, humiliated, de-energized, or belittled? And to me, when I experience somebody like that, I feel like the air has been let out of me. So I don't know if that's familiar, but that's sort of part of it. And if you read research on bullying, jerks, things like that, workplace abuse, there's this sort of moment of sort of deflated self-esteem and energy that comes from interacting with somebody who is nasty. And then the second one, and if you start reading organizational research, the power message is everywhere. So power is a really big part of it, and where it really gets bad is when you have an alleged asshole who consistently aims his or her venom at people with lower status. And a great example of this, there was a show that was on TV for about 15 minutes with Richard Branson called The Rebel Billionaire. And if you saw the first episode, he did this really interesting thing, which was he dressed up as an old sort of broken down cabbie, and he went and he picked up the contestants at the airport who were going to be the Rebel Billionaire's assistant, and he kicked a couple of them off the show on the basis of how he was treated by them. And in fact, one of the things you'll see at the end, I think chapter 1, one of the things that I argue is one of my main tests of a human being is how well they treat people with less power rather than more power. So if you were academics, or if you guys can argue with me about this definition, and I even can argue with myself, but I think it's sort of useful for moving forward. Another distinction I make that's really important is the difference between temporary and certified assholes. Now, I don't know about you, but I have been a temporary asshole many times. And in fact, if you have never been a temporary asshole, I want to meet you immediately. And then I'm going to put you up as like, even Mother Teresa probably had her moments. I mean, so I think we all have that problem. And in fact, this is one of the things I've actually talked with Lars and Stacy about. The question is sort of what happens when you do a transgression, since we're all capable of it. And so this is a quote, actually, one of the administrators in our department. I wrote her a nasty email, and she came to me a couple days later and she said, "You made me cry." And I really was a jerk. It was over a really stupid academic thing. So I made up to her and everything, but it's one of those things, that's a case where I did it, although I think I'm not like that consistently. Then there's certified assholes. Certified assholes, to use a little psychology, who across people, places, and times are consistently demeaning. And there's this great Wall Street 250. And he admitted that 250 might have been right because that didn't include the ones who worked for him for less than 2 weeks. So think about that. And one was fired for bringing him the wrong breakfast muffin, or at least he said he didn't remember it happening, but it was entirely possible. So I think that he would qualify. Okay. All right. So let me talk. There's a huge literature, especially in Britain, and a growing one in the United States, where there's trying to document the damage that assholes do. They also bullying, psychological abuse. I'm going to go through that relatively quickly. So there's a random probability sample of Michigan residents. 1 out of 6 reported persistent. That meant weekly psychological abuse. There's some great surveys in the Veterans Administration Hospital. 36% of workers reported persistent hostility. Then there's some nice random probability samples, especially some done in Michigan. Bernard Tepper did some research in a city on 712 employees. So here's how he measured abusive bosses. Tells me I'm incompetent. Tell me my thoughts and feelings are stupid. The silent treatment, sometimes part of it. And as you can see, the employees who were abused left their jobs at much higher rates. Those who stayed suffered a host of psychological and physical health problems, and also were less committed and less satisfied with their jobs. up. So you can see those sort of effects. Well, those are the kind of things that sort of upset companies a little bit, but where they start worrying is when they see the real costs of putting up with assholes. And the best example I have of this is from a local Silicon Valley company, and I had a very detailed conversation with the manager who showed me a bunch of material, and what happened was that they had this completely demeaning salesperson who was constantly doing late night emails, and I remember in particular the story about how he called and yelled at the people in benefits over a $7 bill, and he was like screaming at them repeatedly, like every day. So this is the kind of thing that really does get people upset. So the folks in HR exacted revenge by carefully calculating the costs it took to maintain this one asshole for 1 year. And look at the numbers. So the time spent by Ethan's manager, $25,000. The HR professionals, $5,000. They told me that was probably low. The senior executives, $10,000. The employment lawyer, the guy had to have an employment lawyer. They had to take an outside employment lawyer. They kept having to replace new secretaries. So that was $85,000. There was plenty of secretaries, assistants in the firm, just none would work for him, so they had to go outside. So I think that's a sign, that's another sort of asshole indicator, is when no assistant in the firm will work for you. The overtime costs associated with his last-minute demands, the anger management training, the total cost of this one asshole for 1 year, $160,000. So to me, I kind of like, that's sort of like, that's good capitalism, actually. So accountants can actually understand that.